No more labored breathing echoing through their English estate. No shuffling footsteps guided by a walking stick. No chaos, no crisis calls, no emergency meetings. For the first time in 57 years, Sharon Osbourne faced absolute silence, and it was destroying her. At 72, the woman who had transformed a chaotic Birmingham musician into the Prince of Darkness was preparing for the most heartbreaking goodbye of her legendary career. 3 months after Ozzy's death on July 22, 2025, Sharon was about to do the unthinkable. Walk away from the empire she'd built with blood, sweat, and pure determination. "I've been doing this since I was 15, and I'm done," she had declared to Billboard in what would become her final major interview. But those words, spoken before tragedy struck, now carried the weight of absolute finality. The decision hadn't come from grief, though grief had certainly shaped it. Sharon had been contemplating retirement long before Ozzy's passing, wanting to spend their final years as husband and wife rather than manager and client. But losing her partner of 43 years had transformed what might have been a gradual transition into something far more devastating. The complete dismantling of rock music's most powerful dynasty. The house felt like a mausoleum. Every corner held memories of the man who had filled their lives with chaos, laughter, and music. The silence that had once been a relief, no more worrying about his pain, had become a constant reminder of the profound emptiness left behind. If this emotional journey of rock's most powerful woman is touching your heart, please consider hitting that like button. Your support helps us honor these deeply personal transitions with the respect they deserve. Sharon's final months in the industry had become a carefully orchestrated symphony of endings. She spent weeks methodically closing operations that had taken decades to build, transferring responsibilities, and ensuring Ozzy's legacy would survive even without her iron grip on every detail. It was vintage Sharon, meticulous, thorough, and utterly devastating to execute. The team meeting that broke everyone's hearts. These weren't just employees, they were family. People who had worked alongside her through countless tours, album releases, and the crisis management situations that had defined their shared history. Some had been there since Ozzy's early solo days, when they were all young, hungry, and ready to take on an industry that had written off the madman from Birmingham. "I called everyone together the week after we returned from Birmingham," Sharon later revealed to close friends. "I looked at these people who had given me their loyalty for decades and had to tell them everything we built together was ending." The reactions were heartbreaking. Her longtime assistant of over 2 decades burst into tears. The tour manager, who had orchestrated hundreds of concerts across 6 continents, simply nodded as if he'd been expecting this moment since Ozzy's final performance. The publicist, who had crafted careful statements through years of controversies, immediately began asking about pension plans and references. "They all understood," Sharon continued. "Without Ozzy, there was no point in continuing. I wasn't just his manager. I was half of a partnership that couldn't exist without both parts." The business of shutting down a decade-spanning entertainment empire proved overwhelmingly complex. Contracts needed reviewing, commitments required fulfilling, and financial arrangements demanded finalization, all while grief made even simple decisions feel insurmountable. The merchandise empire alone was staggering. Ozzy-branded items, from t-shirts to action figures, were still being produced and distributed worldwide. Sharon faced the impossible task of deciding which licenses to continue, which to terminate, and how to handle the inevitable surge in demand following any major artist's death. "The business side of death is something nobody prepares you for," Sharon confided to a longtime industry colleague. "One day you're a widow grieving for your husband. The next you're making decisions about Halloween costume licensing and posthumous album releases. It's completely surreal." The unreleased material presented the most challenging decision. Over his career, Ozzy had recorded dozens of songs that never made it onto albums, early versions of classics, experimental tracks, collaborations that never quite worked. As both his manager and wife Sharon had been the guardian of this musical treasure trove. "There's enough unreleased material for several albums," she revealed to industry insiders. But I refused to flood the market with inferior versions just to make money. Ozzy was always particular about what represented his legacy. I have to honor that, even in death. Cataloging Ozzy's unreleased recordings became both healing and heartbreaking. Listening to his voice across different eras of their relationship brought back memories of late-night studio sessions, creative breakthroughs, and the pure joy he'd always found in making music. But it also emphasized the brutal finality of his absence. These recorded voices were all that remained. Television retirement proved equally difficult. For years, Sharon had been a fixture on talk shows and reality programs, known for her quick wit, unfiltered opinions, and willingness to discuss topics other celebrities avoided. Shows like The Talk and various British programs had kept her in the public eye even when Ozzy's touring was limited by health issues. Television gave me an identity separate from being Ozzy's wife and manager, Sharon explained in one of her final interviews. But it also meant constantly performing, always being Sharon Osbourne for the cameras. I'm tired of performing. I want to just be myself for whatever time I have left. The announcement surprised many who assumed Sharon would continue her media career even after Ozzy's death. She had built a successful brand around her personality, and numerous offers for new projects would have maintained her public profile. But Sharon declined them all, determined to make a clean break. The financial implications required careful navigation. While the Osbourne family was secure thanks to decades of successful touring and shrewd business decisions, Sharon's retirement meant ending several lucrative ongoing projects. Television contracts needed negotiating out of, endorsement deals required terminating, and investment partnerships had to be dissolved. Money has never been Sharon's driving factor, observed a longtime business associate, but she's always been practical about financial security. Stepping away meant ensuring her children and grandchildren would be cared for, and that Ozzy's estate would continue generating income for legacy projects. The most emotionally draining aspect was handling the avalanche of tributes and memorial projects that emerged after Ozzy's death. Record labels, television networks, and documentary producers all wanted to create projects honoring his memory. While Sharon appreciated the love these represented, she found herself overwhelmed by constant requests for interviews, archival footage, and personal memorabilia. "Every day someone wants me to participate in another tribute," Sharon confided to friends. "They all mean well, but I can't spend the rest of my life being the keeper of Ozzy's memory for other people's projects. I need to grieve privately and find a way to honor him that feels authentic to our relationship." Deciding which projects to support became a source of tremendous stress. Sharon wanted Ozzy's legacy protected and properly represented, but she also needed boundaries around her emotional well-being. Some requests were easy to refuse: cash grab compilation albums or sensationalistic documentaries focusing more on controversy than artistry. Others proved more difficult, particularly when they came from longtime friends and collaborators, genuinely wanting to honor Ozzy's memory. Transferring management of Ozzy's estate to professionals required another major undertaking. Sharon had always maintained tight control over every aspect of his career, from set lists to merchandise designs. Finding trustworthy people to continue that attention to detail while giving them autonomy to make decisions without her constant input required delicate balance. Sharon interviewed dozens of potential managers, lawyers, and business administrators, recalled someone involved in the transition. She wasn't just looking for qualified people. She needed individuals who understood Ozzy's values and would make decisions the way she would have. The estate management team Sharon eventually assembled included several people who had worked with the Osbournes for years, ensuring continuity and institutional knowledge. But she also brought in fresh perspectives from younger professionals who understood the changing music industry landscape and could help adapt Ozzy's legacy for new generations. One of Sharon's most controversial final decisions concerned Ozzfest, the touring festival she'd created in 1996 that had launched countless metal band careers and generated millions in revenue over nearly 3 decades. The festival had been on hiatus since 2018 due to Ozzy's health issues, but discussions about reviving it as a memorial to his legacy were ongoing. "Ozzfest was my baby," Sharon said during internal discussions about the festival's future. But it was also Ozzy's platform to showcase artists he believed in. Without him, it becomes just another metal festival. I'm not sure that's what either of us would want. The decision to retire the Ozzfest name permanently proved controversial within the industry. Many promoters and artists argued the festival could continue as a tribute to Ozzy's vision, possibly with rotating headliners and profits going to charity. But Sharon remained adamant that some things should end with dignity rather than continue as pale imitations of their former glory. The charitable foundations Sharon and Ozzy had supported over the years presented another complex set of decisions. The couple had been generous supporters of various causes, from addiction recovery programs to medical research. But many commitments had been managed personally by Sharon, requiring careful consideration of both financial resources and emotional capacity for continued involvement. Sharon has always been very hands-on with charitable giving, noted someone familiar with their philanthropic activities. She didn't just write checks, she attended events and built personal relationships with supported organizations. Stepping away meant disappointing people who had counted on her continued involvement. The Ozzy Osbourne Foundation for Parkinson's Research presented a particular challenge. Established in Ozzy's final years, the foundation had raised significant funds and was supporting important research into the disease that had ultimately contributed to his death. Sharon felt responsible for ensuring its continued success, but recognized that managing a major charitable foundation required energy and attention she might not have in years ahead. Her solution involved transitioning foundation leadership to son Jack, who had his own experience managing chronic illness through his multiple sclerosis diagnosis. Jack understands the medical side in a way I never could, Sharon explained, and he has the passion and energy to really build something meaningful. Personal belongings and memorabilia accumulated over 5 decades presented yet another overwhelming task. The Osbourne homes contained countless items of potential historical significance. Gold records, stage costumes, personal letters from famous musicians, photographs from legendary concerts. Deciding what to keep, donate to museums, or auction for charity required Sharon to relive decades of memories while making rational decisions about their future value. Going through Ozzy's things has been the hardest part of this entire process, Sharon admitted to close friends. Every item tells a story, represents a memory, connects to a particular time in our lives together. How do you decide which memories are worth preserving and which you can let go? Some decisions were straightforward. Ozzy's stage costumes and instruments would go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, ensuring future generations could appreciate the artistry behind his performances. Others were deeply personal and would remain with the family, but hundreds of items fell somewhere between. Valuable but not museum-worthy, meaningful but not essential. The auction house that handled selected Osbourne memorabilia described it as one of the most emotionally complex collections they'd ever managed. Every item had a story, and Sharon knew all of them, said an auction house representative. She'd pick up random equipment from a 1980s tour and immediately remember the specific concert where Ozzy had used it, what song he was playing, what had gone wrong that night. It was like watching someone catalog their entire life. Proceeds from memorabilia sales were designated for charitable causes, ensuring that even the business of saying goodbye would benefit others. But for Sharon, letting go of these physical reminders of their shared history was emotionally exhausting. The media attention surrounding Sharon's retirement was intense and often intrusive. Reporters and photographers tried to capture her final public appearances, while tabloids speculated about her emotional state, financial situation, and future plans. The constant scrutiny made an already difficult process even more challenging. The media has always been fascinated by the Osbournes, observed a longtime entertainment journalist, but there's something particularly intense about covering someone's decision to withdraw from public life. Everyone wants to know why, what it means, whether it's really final. Ironically, the more someone wants privacy, the more determined the media becomes to invade it. Sharon's strategy involved limiting availability while providing enough information to satisfy legitimate public interest. She gave a handful of carefully planned final interviews, participated in one major documentary about Ozzy's life, then gradually reduced media interactions to almost nothing. Relationships with longtime friends and colleagues required delicate navigation. Many had been built around business partnerships, shared tours, and industry events. As Sharon stepped away from professional obligations, she had to determine which friendships were strong enough to survive the transition and which had been primarily based on business convenience. Some people disappeared immediately when it became clear Sharon wasn't going to be a power player anymore, noted a mutual friend. Others reached out more than ever, wanting to ensure she knew the friendship was real. It became an interesting test of relationships that had been decades in the making. The technological aspects of stepping away from a modern entertainment career proved surprisingly complex. Sharon's social media accounts, with millions of followers generating significant engagement, needed decisions about transfer or retirement. Email accounts, digital subscriptions, and online platforms all required evaluation. People don't realize how much digital infrastructure is involved in a modern celebrity career, explained someone who helped Sharon with the technical transition. Every platform, every account, every digital asset had to be evaluated. Some could be automated to continue sharing archival content, others needed active management, and some were better off retired completely. The question of writing a memoir proved particularly challenging. Publishers had been approaching Sharon for years about an autobiography, and interest had only intensified after Ozzy's death. The potential advance would have been substantial, and public appetite for her perspective on their extraordinary life together was clearly evident. But Sharon ultimately decided against the memoir project, at least for the immediate future. "My story is so intertwined with Ozzy's that I don't think I can tell it properly while still grieving," she explained to literary agents. "Maybe someday, but not now. Not while the pain is still so fresh." The home renovation projects Sharon had been planning with Ozzy took on new significance after his death. They had been designing modifications to their English estate that would accommodate his mobility limitations while creating a peaceful retirement environment. Continuing these renovations alone felt both important and heartbreaking. Sharon decided to complete the renovations essentially as planned, said someone familiar with the construction project. She said it was what Ozzy would have wanted, and it would make the house feel more like the home they had envisioned sharing together. But it also meant making decisions about accessibility features she no longer needed, which was emotionally difficult. The gardens Sharon had mentioned in her final Billboard interview, where she talked about baking bread and growing vegetables, became an unexpected source of comfort. Working with soil and plants provided therapy that was both physically engaging and emotionally healing. "Gardening has become Sharon's main activity," observed a neighbor. "She's out there every morning, rain or shine, working with her hands in a way she never had time for during the touring years. There's something about nurturing, growing things that seems to help her process the grief." The relationship with her children evolved significantly during this transition. Jack, Kelly, and Amy had all supported their mother's decision to step away from the industry, but they also had to adjust to having her more available and emotionally present than she'd been in years. "For decades, Sharon was always managing something or someone," noted a family friend. Her children were used to competing with tours, albums, and business crises for her attention. Having her fully present and focused on family has been an adjustment for everyone, but a positive one. Kelly's engagement to Sid Wilson, which had happened backstage at Ozzy's final concert, provided Sharon with welcome distraction and something positive to focus on during her retirement's early months. Planning wedding details and spending time with her grandson Sydney gave her purpose beyond the business of winding down her career. The international aspects of Sharon's career required particularly complex logistics to conclude. Business partnerships in multiple countries, tax obligations across various jurisdictions, and legal commitments spanning different legal systems all needed resolution. Cleanly extracting herself from these international entanglements required months of legal work and significant expense. Managing an international entertainment career creates a web of obligations that can take years to fully resolve, explained one of the lawyers involved in the process. Sharon had contracts and partnerships dating back decades, some with automatic renewal clauses or other complications making simple termination impossible. Insurance issues related to Ozzy's death and career conclusion also proved surprisingly complex. Life insurance policies, disability coverage, and business interruption insurance all required extensive documentation and negotiation. Some policies had specific clauses related to touring income or merchandise sales that needed careful management during the transition period. The staff at Osbourne homes, housekeepers, security personnel, maintenance workers, were also affected by changes in Sharon's lifestyle. Some positions were no longer necessary without the constant flow of business visitors and media commitments, while others became more important as Sharon spent more time at home. The household staff had to adjust to having Sharon home all the time, noted someone familiar with the domestic arrangements. For years, she had been traveling constantly or locked in business meetings. Suddenly, she was present and involved in daily house operations in a way that required everyone to adapt. The relationship with Ozzy's former Black Sabbath bandmates remained strong throughout Sharon's transition, providing continuity and shared memories that proved especially valuable during the grief process. Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and Bill Ward all maintained contact with Sharon, sharing their own memories of Ozzy and providing support during her most difficult moments. "The Sabbath guys have been incredible," Sharon shared with friends. "They knew Ozzy longer than anyone except his family, and they understand the loss in a way that's different from everyone else. Having that connection to his history, to the music that started everything, has been really important." The fan mail and tributes that continued arriving months after Ozzy's death presented another ongoing challenge. While Sharon appreciated the love and support fans were expressing, the sheer volume of correspondence was overwhelming. She hired a part-time assistant specifically to help manage fan communications, ensuring people received acknowledgement of their tributes while protecting her emotional bandwidth. "The fans have been amazing," Sharon acknowledged, "but I can't read every letter or watch every tribute video without completely breaking down. It's wonderful that people loved Ozzy so much, but I have to find balance between honoring that love and protecting my own ability to heal." Holiday seasons following Ozzy's death proved particularly difficult. Christmas and New Year's had always been important family times for the Osbournes, with traditions built around Ozzy's presence and personality. Navigating these celebrations without him, while dealing with the business of closing down their professional life, was emotionally exhausting. "The first Christmas was brutal," Sharon confided to close friends. "Everything reminded me of Ozzy. Decorations we'd collected over the years, family recipes he loved, gifts he would have wanted to give the grandchildren. But I also knew I had to create new traditions, find ways to celebrate that honored his memory without being completely dominated by grief." The educational components of Ozzy's legacy received particular attention from Sharon. Music scholarships, educational programs, and institutions that could teach future generations about heavy metal's history and artistry received significant attention and funding as part of her farewell projects. As Sharon's final days in the music industry drew to a close, she found herself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had taken her from a teenager working for her father's management company to one of rock and roll's most powerful women. The industry had changed dramatically during her 5 decades of involvement, but her core principles, protecting artists, fighting for fair treatment, and maintaining artistic integrity, had remained constant. "I've seen the music business evolve from a boys' club that barely tolerated women to an industry where female executives and managers are commonplace," Sharon reflected in one of her final industry interviews. "I'm proud to have been part of that change, even when it meant fighting battles that shouldn't have been necessary." Sharon's career impact extended far beyond her work with Ozzy. She had managed other significant artists, launched countless careers through Ozzfest, and influenced industry practices around artist management and touring logistics. Her retirement represented the end of an era in rock management that had emphasized personal relationships and hands-on involvement over corporate efficiency. The final contract Sharon signed on behalf of Ozzy's estate related to a comprehensive documentary about his life that would be produced by a major streaming platform. Unlike many tribute projects she had declined, this documentary would have unprecedented access to family archives and would be produced with full family input and approval. "This documentary will be our final statement about who Ozzy really was," Sharon explained. "Not the wild man character the media created, but the father, husband, and artist who meant everything to us. It's the last major project I'll be personally involved in, and I want it to be perfect." On a quiet Tuesday morning in October 2025, Sharon Osbourne walked out of the London offices that had served as headquarters for Ozzy's business operations for the last time. She carried with her a small box of personal items, photographs, a coffee mug that had been a gift from Ozzy, and a handwritten note he had left for her on their last Valentine's Day together. The office would be closed permanently within the week, its contents distributed to archives, family members, and charitable organizations. The phones that had once rung constantly with calls from promoters, journalists, and industry executives would be disconnected. The walls that had witnessed decades of negotiations, celebrations, and crisis management would soon be empty. As Sharon's car pulled away from the building, she didn't look back. The woman who had spent her entire adult life fighting other people's battles, managing other people's careers, and protecting other people's interests was finally free to simply be herself. At 72, she was beginning the first chapter of her life that would belong entirely to her. The final days of Sharon Osbourne's career in the music industry had been marked by the same fierce dedication and attention to detail that had made her legendary. She had protected Ozzy's legacy, provided for her family's future, and maintained her principles even while dismantling everything she had built. In choosing to end her career on her own terms, with dignity and purpose, she had provided one final lesson in how to say goodbye with grace. The sad farewell was complete, but the next chapter, whatever it might hold, was just beginning. In the gardens of her English estate, surrounded by the peace she had never had time to appreciate during her decades in the music industry, Sharon Osbourne was finally free to discover who she might become when no longer defined by the empire she had built around the man she loved. If Sharon Osbourne's graceful farewell to her legendary career has moved you as deeply as it has moved those who knew her, please share this story and leave a like. Her decision to step away with dignity while carefully protecting the legacy she helped build reminds us that true strength sometimes lies in knowing when to let go, and that the most powerful farewells are the ones that leave everything in better shape than it was found.